This video is sponsored by Preve. When it comes to supernatural fiction, I think there is no other piece of media that has had such a phenomenal impact than Ghostbusters. In fact, one could argue it helped bring the paranormal to global mainstream attention 2 years after Poltergeist made everyone want to burn their house down out of fear that an evil clown might be lurking under their bed. Following its release in December 1984, Ghostbusters became an immediate icon, from aesthetics to quotes to pre-internet memes to even a powerful marketing tool. Suddenly, it was fashionable to associate everything with Busters this and Busters that, and busting a nut over how Bill Murray was now apparently the second coming of Jesus or something. Hell, I think director and producer Ivan Reitman best summarized why it instantly cemented itself within pop culture legacy. Unlike all the other repetitive haunted house style movies of the era that were reliant on jump scares and gore, Ghostbusters was that one rare ghost story with a positive and fulfilling outcome where everyone actually emerges far better from it.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass!
It's a genuinely sweet, warm-hearted, upbeat fantasy adventure that plants its supernatural elements right in the heart of a busy, everyday setting while still delivering on mature undertones, an adult sense of humor, and the occasional modest creep factor that left poor young Ryan terrified of fried eggs. However, while everyone went along with its comedic charm, I think a significant portion of Ghostbusters' long-lasting success is how it helps soften the immense stigma towards people's belief and general interest in the paranormal by introducing audiences to themes of skepticism, open-mindedness, and the surprisingly taboo territory of parapsychology, which at the time was under an intense amount of academic scrutiny, as it seemed like everyone wanted to have a go at debunking the paranormal.
I've heard the question, but the question is not valid because it's making an assumption which is not true.
Ghostbusters' influence is so far-reaching that we would be here all day trying to cover everything, so to end the year, instead of looking at another mean-spirited, nasty horror movie, why don't we spend the time getting to know how Ghostbusters made the paranormal profoundly popular? So let's talk about... Hold on a second. Did you know before I make any of my videos, I always like to treat myself to a nice cup of coffee, but the thing is, I can never make one that matches the quality that my sister or her husband can make because they're hardcore coffee snobs and I'm not. However, thanks to this video's sponsor Preve, I simply went onto their website, admitted I was inexperienced, filled in their survey, and then they recommended and catered a freshly, ethically produced coffee to my liking that stands apart from all the generic crap that you can buy in the supermarket. Until I started trying different flavors of coffee for myself, I genuinely did not believe the artsy-fartsy hype behind it, but it's actually given me a newfound appreciation for the taste over my admitted dependency on caffeine to get me through the day. Preve grounded the beans for me, and then I put them through a clever dripper that my sister got me, and filter it through so it retains all the flavor described on the label, and I get the most quality out of my coffee. If you want to know what I mean firsthand, Preve is giving away the first 100 people who click the link below 30% off their first coffee. And if you decide to get it for yourself, let me know which coffee you get, because I quite like the bags they come in. They're actually quite cool. I'm going to start collecting these actually. But anyway, now that we have our freshly brewed Christmas coffee, let's talk about Ghostbusters. For historical context, when it comes to movies produced by and or starring SNL alumni, there's no denying the impact many of them had on popularizing subgenres within contemporary American comedy, while subsequently helping to launch the careers of some of the most celebrated comedic actors in Hollywood, quality be damned. But here's the thing, these types of movies are basically what outsiders sometimes derogatorily consider an American thing, in that they all kind of blend into one another that it's difficult to distinguish them from every other zany, brash, and, for lack of a better description, obnoxiously loud stereotypical American comedy that Saturday Night Live pretty much helped standardize for a large portion of the late 20th century, and even today it still bleeds into modern cinema thanks to the likes of Adam Sandler and Will f***ing Ferrell. For every Caddyshack, we get a love guru or whatever the hell that Dana Carvey film was supposed to be, but the point is this: many of these films failed due to their dependence on comedians best known for weekly turnovers and sketch caricatures that work within the context of stage comedy that benefit from the instant reaction of a live studio audience, which is the very polar opposite production cycle of a film crafted over several years. Ghostbusters, on the other hand, was one of the true shining examples of breaking that mold, and avoiding the theatrical overindulgent pitfalls common to SNL performers by blending between sarcasm, wit, nuanced observation, slapstick, and eventually, once we were desensitized to it all, pure, unflinching absurdity.
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
It's funny because it isn't trying to be clever or call attention to itself. It takes such a bizarre, fantastical premise and carefully places it within a contemporary, monotone, depressive New York setting, where the ghostbusting itself isn't just some big, elaborate hijinks, but rather, it's simply a job that comes with all the same trials and tribulations we experience in our own lives.
Do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, clairvoyance, spirit photography, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
The problem with the 2016 reboot is that it's the exact type of Americanization that SNL cultivated, in that despite having a genuinely talented cast of comedians, it's just annoyingly energetic for the sake of it, and forces one-note caricature over actual character that, as a result, misses the grounded human side to a story that's more about everyday misfits trying to fit in with a society that seems to constantly reject them. The original Ghostbusters understood what eccentricity actually was, by creating very unique personalities who have various quirks and abnormal behaviours that each of us can very much relate to, especially Peter Venkman, who at first acts like the straight guy sardonically rebuking everybody's oddball behaviour, before eventually embracing how he's really just as odd as the rest of them. Considering Dan Aykroyd wrote the script around his research and curiosities into the paranormal, it's a film that is not afraid to be stigmatized. Sure, Aykroyd is totally crazy in real life, but like with some of society's ignorant dismissiveness towards people's passion for high-concept ideas, sometimes treating adults like children who haven't grown up yet, which is somewhat manifested in Ray's giddy excitement for the paranormal, Ghostbusters is that shout-out to every misunderstood misfit out there that they're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with being passionate in the extraordinary or unorthodox aspects of life. I actually find the most interesting thing about Aykroyd and Harold Ramis' script to be that they very deliberately developed the story around the business aspects of the Ghostbusters themselves. While I can't speak for the film's apparent Reagan-era politics, Aykroyd stated that their jobs are basically the equivalent to pest control workers, as demonstrated in their first gig at the hotel, which in an odd way grounds the story in reality as the ghosts almost become somewhat of an intentional afterthought. After all, the setup to the story isn't just three wannabe heroes looking to save the world from some mysterious supernatural danger. The catalyst to their journey is that their college department funding gets cut, leaving them unemployed, and then they decide to go into business for themselves, utilizing their talents in the hopes of providing a public service. That's the thing, it's essentially about a startup company trying to survive in this big, bad, crazy world where ghosts are the least of their worries when up against all the stern, arrogant, and impatient people who don't have time to deal with their shenanigans. For as intelligent as they are, they're just as flawed and idiotic as the rest of us. There's nothing at all remarkable about them, and that's why it's easier for you to sympathize with them. This isn't some cartoon wacky fantasy, it's a real world set to the tone of Walter Peck's symbolic party pooper mentality, as he wants to spoil everyone's fun essentially, while the Ghostbusters want to reject this and live in their bubble where ghosts are a common thing.
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Granted, his concerns are absolutely justifiable, given the Ghostbusters contain the ghosts in what is practically an unsanctioned, unstable nuclear bomb, on top of the fact that they use untested proton packs that subvert what should be silly comedic hijinks into genuinely dangerous activities that could actually get someone killed.
What the hell are you doing?
Which you're convinced could happen because, as I said, the world is set up to feel so believable. Again, there's nothing cartoonish about this. The ghosts are not the real danger. The Ghostbusters are. It establishes the ghosts as technically innocuous, presenting them as nothing more than an inconvenience than an actual threat.
He slimed me.
The Ghostbusters more or less bring trouble to themselves, as their real challenges are all the typical bureaucratic bollocks like the Environmental Protection Agency and smug entitled clients who disrespect their work, which is a genuine insight into an elitist perception of blue-collar occupations. That's part of the film's powerful relatability. It all sounds fun on paper with all the supernatural shenanigans, but in reality, there's so much paperwork and grinding to be done alongside the oppressiveness of society's constant mocking and scrutiny of their work. Reitman adds that all this realistic focus on business stuff was not only relatable to the creators who were starting their own businesses at the time, but pretty much a lampoon of how everyone was starting a business. It was a popular fad similar to the dot-com bubble of the 90s that very quickly crashed everyone back down to earth. Hell, Rick Moranis' Lewis even adds to the film's emphasis on business and economics by literally making his character an accountant who goes as far as to invite his clients to his private party because then he can claim everything back as a business expense. That's actually kinda clever when you think about it. And then you have the Ghostbusters pitching to the mayor as to why they should be let out of prison to save the day, which turns into less about saving lives and more about saving the lives of registered voters. In fact, I think it adds a level of irony to the story because there's an actual supernatural threat that's escalating in the background. We become so distracted by all the overwhelming real-world pressures that when it finally comes time to dealing with the Zool situation, it turns out to be a surprisingly easy issue to overcome. Yet, in comparison, somehow dealing with this motherfucker proved extremely problematic. But anyway, what about this real danger to the film, you ask? What I love about the main supernatural conflict of the story is purely how hardcore Lovecraftian it is. In summary, an apartment complex designed by a demon-worshipping architect contains a portal to another dimension, where a skeptic called Dana discovers a demigod known as Zool the Gatekeeper hiding in her fridge that eventually possesses her, while another creature known as Vince Clortho, the Keymaster of Gozer, possesses Lewis of all people, where the two gods aim to reconnect to unleash Gozer the Gozerian, a shape-shifting god of destruction who asks the Ghostbusters to choose a form for it, only for Ray to inadvertently select his beloved childhood corporate mascot, bringing back the whole business theme, and what we get is the glorious payoff that is the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Whew, that is a wild chain of events to say the least, but by the conclusion you naturally go along with it because after all the chaos of getting the Ghostbusters operation up and running, some escapism is definitely what you need, even if it's not exactly what you probably had in mind. Admittedly, I found it a little anticlimactic at first because it really doesn't last all that long, but at the end of the day, this story had one goal, and that was to see this group of misfits finally find acceptance in society. At the heart of it all, acceptance becomes the major theme of it, accepting the oddities of the world along with the eccentric nature of others, and in general, having tolerance for each other. It was a complete story that wrapped itself up perfectly and gave us that joyous finish to make you feel good about yourself. And then the sequel happened. Ghostbusters 2 is exactly what comes to mind when I think of artistic reluctance to make a sequel, yet being overcome by studio pressure to milk a very lucrative cash cow. After Ghostbusters was franchised into toys, fashion, and various other commercial adaptations, fittingly playing into the first film's premise of finding success in the big bad business world, it was only a matter of time that Columbia Pictures would basically demand a sequel. the sequel's development was infamously conflicted, ranging from executives butting heads to the cast and crew having little faith in a sequel to simply nobody really having the time to commit to such a demanding project anymore. The thing was, during the 5-year gap between both films, it was the animated series carrying its longevity and caused a significant incline in the children's demographic, meaning that Aykroyd and Ramis felt pressure to cater the sequel script to a more family-friendly audience given the original had subject matter that went over most children's heads. But while it certainly has a tamer, less inventive quality to it, thankfully it doesn't completely flanderize its characters or rely on absurdities that undermine the grounded feel of the first film. In fact, while the story itself is wholly unremarkable, it isn't entirely forgettable thanks to Peter MacNicol given the only impassioned performance as an outlandish art restorer whose name I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce. While his performance occasionally borders on overacting to compensate for the weaker jokes, you've got to give it to MacNicol for at least having fun with the character, while everyone else clearly don't want to be there. Hell, I was worried that the film giving Lewis more of a role this time would add way too much eccentricity to the film, but to Rick Moranis' credit, he along with Janine are given more nuance and development. They come off as genuinely thoughtful and compassionate characters, in contrast to the first film where Lewis comes off as a bit creepy and Janine is just purely there for sass. And even Winston becomes an actual character that feels part of the team this time, as opposed to being the first film's diversity card amongst a sea of all white people. Granted, I am very mixed about how miserable the film initially begins, by showing us that Peter and Dana had a failed relationship and she somehow went off, got married, had a kid and quickly divorced, while the Ghostbusters themselves have failed to maintain their business, resorting in them separating to other jobs while doing birthday parties for kids as a side hustle, which honestly I can't help but feel like that was a subtle jab at how softened pop culture quickly made them. I also think it's odd watching how passive and domesticated Dana is written in the sequel, given Sigourney Weaver was famously a powerful female role model off the back of Aliens, that she just feels extremely out of place here. At worst, the film is just a bit of a slog when re-establishing the characters. Hell, there's no actual ghostbusting until a third of the way into the story, with a fun little courtroom scene that's ultimately the best part of the entire movie. In fairness, while the original had scenes like the arms ripping out of the chair and that librarian ghost, the sequel does have some arguably creepier moments, like the severed heads, the evil Mary Poppins who turns out to be Peter MacNicol dressed up, and I distinctly remember being traumatized by the slime possessing the bathtub in this scene. In this film, a mysterious slime has manifested itself throughout the city and is discovered to be fueled by the negative emotions of the city, which Ramis described as being a symbol of urban decay, which I like the idea of because of the moral panic and fears generated by crime, poverty and social breakdown, but it doesn't come across in the film at all because of the lack of any actual demonstration of said urban decay. I mean, since the first film depicted a lot of negativity from people that the Ghostbusters had to deal with, I guess I see where it continues the motif, but it does result in a pretty ham-fisted climax that mirrors the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man by having the Ghostbusters use the slime to possess the Statue of Liberty to get the population of New York positive and joyful in order to defeat the evil. In some way, it does work along the spirit of the Christmas holidays where the film is set, but it doesn't exactly have a subtle way of going about it. The main ghost demon painting thing itself isn't as intimidating as the film wants you to think. It feels largely goofy as opposed to threatening, making its inevitable escape from the painting nowhere near as provocative as Gozer's sinister appearance. But that's the point, it's not as terrible as people say it is, it just really falls flat on its face and has just a very mediocre overall quality to it. Whereas the original Ghostbusters embodied a bit of everything. It was funny, creepy and balanced lightheartedness with mature undertones that gave us a relatable and sensitive portrait of the stresses of work life while still reminding us to never forget to have fun. In short, Ghostbusters was a celebration of our oddities, an invite to indulge on the wondrous side of our imagination and play off society's overly serious nature in a world that's constantly full of surprises. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to keep this brief because I'm sure we all want to get away for the Christmas holidays. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who watched my videos this year. I am extremely grateful for your support, and I hope I did you proud. Let me know in the comments below what you want me to cover in 2020, and hopefully it will make it into my catalogue, but who knows, the world could end next year. We have no clue. YouTube might not exist. Anything could happen, but you gotta remain positive and all that. So until next time, have a wonderful holiday season, stay very, very safe, and if you want to try out Trade Coffee for yourself, the link is right in that description box below. The first 100 people get 30% off. And until next time, yeah, see you very soon. I'm going to go on holiday. Yay! Bye!